Ladies and gentlemen, this is your final boarding call for the good ship SS Tomorrow.
Today on The Friendly Futurist is a declaration of war, a war against fast fashion. We've got upcyclers who are recycling your wardrobe and making the world a better place. Welcome back to The Friendly Futurist, and now I'm going on a bit of a rant. And it's a rant about fast fashion. If you were to write the 7 deadly sins of the modern age, revisit Dante's seminal work from the 16th century, I reckon you should put discounting right at the top of a deadly, deadly, deadly sin. In fact, you should burn in hell for wanting discounts all the time. You see, discounts and being trained on price, this is where I put my marketing scholar hat on, is doing so much untold damage to the planet, people and society, all for the name of a $5 t-shirt. That $5 t-shirt from Kmart looks really tempting, but you know the human cost for it. For starters, it probably is grown from low-grade cotton. Now, cotton, as a country boy, I know this for a fact, is one of the most water-thirsty crops out there. In fact, over in the east coast of Australia, we're diverting our biggest river, the Murray-Darling Basin, especially in Western Queensland, just to grow cotton. Cotton by itself is a quite expensive product, so we're mixing that with polyester. Now, polyester is a petroleum byproduct. You see where it's heading. Now, to get that T-shirt, to get it to $5, you actually are encouraging, and you just to keep that cost down, everything needs to be able to make a profit, otherwise, you'll go out of business. That is probably making for very little money in a sweatshop in Asia, most likely places like Bangladesh. There are other places in Southeast Asia that we need to be wary of. Kids as young as 10 are working their butts off in slave-like conditions, and really horrible, horrible things. We would not accept it here in the West. Now, this is the other thing about the supply chain. You might have one factory making that one T-shirt. You have a separate factory in another country, they'll dye and print that T-shirt. You might even have another factory, sometimes in Latin America, will put the tags on. And finally, they'll get shipped around the world. So by the time that $5 T-shirt gets into Kmart or any other major big retailers here, I'm not here to defame anyone, but that's one that comes to mind first of all. And it's probably done a huge, about 3 or 4 laps of the Earth. And you think about how much carbon that's getting pumped into the atmosphere. The sad fact is that 100% of clothing can be recycled. Yet only 15% of clothing can get recycled. 85% are just getting worn once or never worn or thrown straight into the charity bin. Now, back in August, and this is the inspiration behind chatting to upcyclers on the ABC and here in Australia, and I'm going to play a clip for you.
On the coast of West Africa, the ships arrive day after day with an unrelenting cargo. In Ghana, they call them obroni wawu, or the clothes of dead white men.
We all think we're doing the right thing when we have unwanted clothes by throwing it into the charity bin. We want to help those who are less fortunate. Everyone should have food that's on the table. And we think we're helping out the charities, and a lot of that clothes gets rejected because it's either torn, has stains on it, or it just has no use, or the charity shop might be at capacity. Whatever reason, that gets into another supply chain. Often in Australia, it'll go over to Southeast Asia first, then it'll go over to the Middle East, and finally it'll end up in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, on the ABC documentary, it was in Ghana. And, Ghana is West Africa. It is very hot, very humid. Now, once it reaches Ghana, it'll be sold in bundles, and the locals there have a term for it. It's dead white man's clothing. Often it'll get sold, if it's good quality, with merchants in a central market in Accra. However, ones that aren't rejected go straight into landfill. And it gets worse because, as I said before, Ghana is a very hot, humid country. Every time there's a monsoon or rain, that water, those clothes that just lie on the street gets washed into the wastewater, stormwater drains, and then it can get out to sea, and there's a whole big tangled mess of clothes just lying off the beach, and it's just killing off the environment. All that chemicals and everything like that is just, and not to imagine that if it's going into landfill, it's getting burnt. So it's really, really quite polluting, this practice. But here, I can go on forever about this rant, but it's not what this show's about. We're all about cautious optimism. We want to highlight those in the community who are doing the right thing. And today's guests are coming from arguably the fashion capital of Australia, Melbourne. We've got Annabelle Lott and Sophie Gunnison from Mills & York. And they have recently done a campaign about this because Mills & York is a peer-to-peer clothing exchange. It's stopping those clothes from getting into the charity bins and into that nasty cycle. And they had a campaign recently called Secondhand September. My other guest is a stylist by the name of Katrina Nash from A Fitting Connection, and it's her quest, so to speak, to educate the up-and-coming Gen Zers about the importance about recycling clothes. Now, one last final thought, and I'm really a champion of this. We all remember our grandparents. I mean, my gran in particular was an adult during the war and the Depression, and she recycled everything. But he also had that attitude of make, do and mend. I'm a very big champion and believer in make, do and mend. Now, these ladies are all based in Melbourne. They're all doing amazing things with fashion and upcycling. And a part of our campaign to get rid of slow fashion, we've got them on the line. We're starting off with Donna. And Donna, thank you very much for coming onto the show.
Thank you very much, Dave. Great to be here.
First of all, why ethical fashion?
Well, because it's time. The fashion industry is one of the biggest polluters in the world. And I remember the exact time when I became serious about this issue. I mean, I'd always been brought up to be reasonably aware of the environment and not a wasteful person. But I used to love going to secondhand vintage markets. And I remember one day walking into one, paying my gold coin and heading through the gate of this secondhand market at a primary school here in Melbourne. And I was walking around all these stores and there was nothing to buy. It was complete rubbish. Yep. The garments, and I have to say it was mostly young women who were selling stuff. They were fast fashion items that had been bought, not that long ago. So we're not talking proper vintage, but the seams were coming undone. The fabric was all peeled. The buttons were coming off. No. They'd sort of gone out of shape after a few washes. And really, it was just rubbish.
Wow.
I remember thinking to myself, well, not only is fast fashion ruining what we can get in the stores, but it's also having a major impact on the second-hand and eventually the vintage market.
Absolutely. And what are some of the more main environmental and societal issues with the fashion industry right now?
Well, there's been for a long time a human cost to all of this. The people who make our clothes, we generally never meet. That is turning around a little bit, but generally they're overseas, being paid really poorly, being forced to work in a lot of cases in very unsafe conditions, just trying to hit quotas that are near impossible. So we talk more and more these days about the Modern Slavery Act And that's a real thing. And it's not just overseas either. There are even some factories here in Australia that are not treating their workers, the garment manufacturers, the way that they should be, because we've just taken fashion for granted. We expect now to be able to buy a $5 T-shirt. Well, hey, they don't grow on trees.
That's right. And
it's a big process to produce a piece of clothing.
yeah, well,
We've lost the appreciation for what goes into that manufacturing. We've lost respect for the workers. We just don't understand the process because we don't, most of us don't create things from home anymore. So we don't understand just how long a process it is to provide that $5 T-shirt.
Yeah, well, I guess that, cheap things do come at a cost, and unfortunately as the cost is some human is getting, on the other end of the supply chain, is getting ripped off.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're looking at a $5 T-shirt or a $20 dress or whatever it might be, think about it. Very often it would be made of cotton, so that's got to be, grown. That's a crop. Think about harvesting that cotton. Think about transporting that. Then the cotton's got to be woven or knitted, and then it's got to be dyed in a lot of cases, and then it's got to be transported to people who are experts in pattern making. And that's a very, very high skill set and very different from the actual sewing of the garment. And then it generally goes to a retailer. So everybody along that process is trying to make a profit. So if you think about a $5 T-shirt, there's a lot of people getting ripped off along the way.
And also the planet's getting ripped off too if it's cotton, because cotton is a very water-thirsty crop, especially, here in Australia with the damming of the Murray-Darling Basin.
It most certainly is.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know who ever thought it was a good idea for Australians to get into cotton. It's actually a really bad idea. And, of course, with such low prices, the fact that we can just buy clothes so cheaply now, we've become a bit greedy, and a lot of us just have excess clothing.
Yeah.
And then what do we do with that? Because there's the thirst for more. Well, there was a fantastic documentary made by the ABC. Linton Besser was the investigative journalist who created this. And it was all about what the sort of first world countries do with excess clothing. Basically, they ship it over to Africa, some of the African countries, and these textiles, if they can't be sold in their secondhand markets, then they just become textile waste for other countries to deal with. There's these massive trash mountains, basically, and then when it rains, the rain just washes through all the synthetics. So if the garment's not cotton, then it's almost always polyester. So then when the rain goes through that, all the textiles, then that releases toxins into the groundwater that impacts the drinking water, the local communities have to use and even wash from, and then that impacts the soil fertility. So there's actually a huge, huge, huge reason that we need to turn around the way that we view fashion, both making it and consuming it.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think less is more sometimes, and I think that we should be retrained on quality rather than price. I think that's the one thing that's killing us all.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
We've just become a bit greedy in terms of just buying more and more and more. I mean, I love clothes. I'm a personal stylist. I work with people around clothing, and I love clothes as much as anybody. But as you just said, it's about choosing well.
On a more positive note, Donna, can you talk us through your model of building a more sustainable wardrobe using colour?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of sort of strategic decisions we can apply to our wardrobe. And, living in Melbourne, we're very fortunate to have access to a whole lot of ethical and sustainable designers. This is sort of a new movement that's really only picked up in the last, say, 5 years. But obviously not everybody has access to those kinds of suppliers. So I thought I'd come up with this model that anybody can apply, regardless of age or gender or whatever. So colour is something that I thought would be really good for people to apply. If you're sort of working within a colour palette, it means that everything coordinates together really well. You haven't got sort of orphan clothing sitting in your wardrobe that can't be worn with anything else. Everything coordinates well. It makes the most of what you're buying, and it all looks good together. And Of course, we all like to look good.
Yes.
We don't just want to be ethical and sustainable. We can have a lot of fun with our clothing as well. So if we understand the colours that work well for us, and we're all going to have sort of different colouring and therefore a different palette of clothes that look really good on us, then we're going to get compliments, we're going to feel good about ourselves, and we're going to love those clothes, and so we'll hang on to them.
Is there any other ways we can rebuild a sustainable fashion industry?
Well, we really need to change our behaviour, as we said already. We need to rethink it. We need to appreciate what goes into making clothing. And I think something that COVID has given us is that appreciation for the local businesses. We've seen them struggling, maybe not so much in WA, but in a lot of other places. There's been a real pressure on the local businesses, and it's very sad to see them close. So that was closed down, not clothes. So, just buying locally, finding out who your independent producers are and your locals, and, so that we're not reliant on things being shipped from halfway around the world from other countries and the profits going over there. Try and promote the local. Asking questions about what it is that we buy, what's on offer, so whether it be a retailer or online. So informing yourself about the process of manufacturing. I think you might know, Dave, that a few years ago, a business partner and I created sort of an offshoot of my business called Fashion by Foot. Now, these are ethical fashion tours.
Wow.
So we take people behind the scenes so that they can see how clothing is made, and they get to meet the designers and the creators and ask questions about their ranges and what goes on to pull a whole collection together. And I think that's, there is an appreciation once again for the local, the handmade, and that sort of low-run production. Like we did with food sort of a couple of decades ago. We stopped buying just fast food. We started appreciating the farm-to-table kind of experience. Well, fashion is just starting to have that same principle applied to it.
It also implies us having different materials as well. I think like something like hemp or sustainably grown wool might be another way out as well. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And there's some really interesting kind of hybrid materials and fabrics that are being developed around the world now that are, say, less water dependent. Also things that are being used, like products that have been created from waste, which is really, really clever.
Yeah. So joining on us on the line now is Annabelle Lott and Sophie Gunnison from Mills and York. Annabelle and Sophie, welcome. And how did Secondhand September go?
Dave, we've been thrilled with the response to Secondhand September. We jumped on board to support this Oxfam initiative, which really challenges and encourages consumers to reduce their fashion footprint by only shopping secondhand for the entire month, which is tricky for some, but it's okay for us. Yeah, it was really about making, sort of small, mindful changes, steering clear of fast fashion, and just trying to make an impact in the space and reassess and think, do I really need this new piece? Do I really, need this in my wardrobe? So I think this whole initiative has been amazing for us. It's opened a lot of doors into the circular economy and hopefully helped others realise that it's cool to care, and pre-loved is fulfilling and fun and rewarding.
And how did this all come about?
Mills and York is a community where fashion lovers can rent, lend, resell and buy designer and vintage fashion. We really wanted to liberate great fashion from stylish wardrobes and create a more circular fashion economy. Our focus was really about changing the way we consume fashion, and our model being peer-to-peer enables members to chat and create banter about fashion where they can discuss things amongst themselves and build a community, which was really the forefront of what our plan was at the start.
Yeah, what's the inspiration behind starting this?
Well, we've both got a severe love of fashion. We were sharing pieces. So Mills and York is in York Street and Annabelle's in Mill Street, and it was about sharing economy. So we were taking clothes back and forth, and it was born from that. It quickly grew into other people asking us for different pieces, and then we saw a bit of a gap in the market of a resale and rental. And then we just started plugging away in the background and built this platform and launched it, and it's been great fun. We're learning every day.
And I think as things are coming through, that was so much of new product, we saw that these items needed to be reloved. And so we've really embraced and wanting to encourage the community to look to secondhand first.
And I suppose you're over in Melbourne in lockdown and people are stuck at home, they'll probably get sick of seeing the same old clothes, and it's probably a good thing to get rid of them in a nice, circular economy sort of way.
Yeah, there's a lot of people sitting around looking in their wardrobes thinking, God, I've got so much stuff that's just,
where am I going to wear this again?
And is it true that 85% of all clothes that come through you have still got the tags on them?
Oh, Dave, such an outrageous number. We know, look, Australian women only wear 33% of her wardrobe, while the rest of it sits in her wardrobe unworn and often with tags on. And this is exactly what we found. We were surprised by the number of items that we received that had never been worn, shoes that had never hit the pavement, and clothes that had tags on. Most of the items listed on Mills & York are brand new.
Wow.
And it just creates such an importance, a reason why you should look to secondhand first, because a lot of it is brand new, needing to be loved.
And how can we educate the public further about this problem? How can we warn about, say, the dangers of continuing the fast fashion trend and the textile waste?
The irony here is that, fashion revolves around the latest trends and, what's in, what's hot, what colours are good. But we really feel like the industry is sort of behind in this curve on the trend that ultimately matters, and that's, educating people to alter their patterns of consumption, which I think is the key here to survival, not only in the textile industry, but in everyone's industry. The statistic that scared us most when we started was that the textile industry is the second largest global polluter, and we just wanted to make an impact by small incremental steps, by educating people that by consuming less and embracing secondhand, you're really placing less demand on this new economy and overproduction. So I think resale is in and the only way up.
Absolutely. And also I think, just like a little point as well, it's the material that clothes are made out of too. I think needs to be brought home, especially with cotton, which is a water-thirsty crop, and polyester comes from fossil fuels. I think that's
and also even in the impacts on textile workers, the way they work. There's vast amount of things that need to change in the industry.
So this comes to my next question: is because a lot of these materials drive the prices down, do we need to re-educate the public on buying quality that lasts for years rather than price?
Yes, Dave, we absolutely agree. We think you do. We're not saying, Mills & York, we're not saying don't ever shop again. What we're saying is think about your purchases, buy what you love and invest in quality. The clothing that is cheaply made and poorly constructed was not made to withstand multiple wears. And we need to get rid of this throwaway culture that is out there. Just to keep in mind that quality is remembered long after the price is forgotten.
Absolutely. I love that point. And on a lighter note, Annabelle and Sophie, when you're running Mills & York, have you ever come across any disregarded clothing and thinking, I wouldn't mind that for myself?
Good question.
I'll let Sophie answer this one.
I am what you would call a vampire in a blood bank. So it has been horrendous for me and my hip pocket. No, everything that comes into Mills & York is beautiful, and we're as good as the things we reject. So it's very high quality, stunning pieces. I'm just lucky I've got a large foot, so I can't buy everything. But it's been hard. I honestly haven't been into a retail store as such for, I'd say, over 2 years. I've only bought pre-loved.
Sometimes I do have to tell her to hold back and let our members buy it instead of Sophie having it. But we do find it hard because the product is so beautiful, and as I said before, brand new, that it's like we're buying new, and we just really want to keep those items loved and being worn.
We're definitely looking forward to things opening up so, we can share them with others too.
And we've got Katrina, founder of A Fitting Connection, on the line. And Katrina, welcome to the show. Can you first tell my audience what A Fitting Connection is all about?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dave. Yes, A Fitting Connection is a place designed to be a one-stop shop for people that want to have their own fashion label. They might be new to the industry or they might have been in for a couple of years. And it's just a place that they can come to, and we can help them from start to finish with designers, pattern makers, seamstresses, and production as well. We're sort of a consultation service as well as an agency, all rolled up into one.
How did this all come about? What was the inspiration behind A Fitting Connection?
So I left full-time work quite some time ago now and was freelancing for mainly bigger companies. And then as I was doing that, a few more smaller companies approached me to help them out. And I was noticing that they had a lot of questions and they just didn't have all the connections they needed. But I had all those connections. So we've come together. Fin Connection was born to come with all these other connections in place in the one place so that we can work on a collection or a business as a whole looking group and not getting misinformation mixed all over the place. So we unify our conversations. And so each of our people that we work with, we all have regular catch-ups and meetings to discuss the clients and make sure that we're all on the same path.
Of course, today we're talking about upcycling and hopefully the end of fast.
So that's right. So over the the fashion industry hasn't always sat well with me, even though I've been in it for, all my working life. But over the last 12 months of, silver lining to COVID, it's allowed me to investigate that a little bit more and seeing what I can do within the industry. So what we've done is we developed a program called Fundraising with Purpose. And the idea is that we work with students in a school setting, with a primary school or high school, and we work with them to understand what textile waste is, identify what we can make from it, product develop those. We work with volunteers to then make those products, and then the students sell those products to raise awareness as well as funds for their school or their adopted charity.
Yeah, good stuff. And why is fast fashion so bad for the environment?
Yes, great question. So there's lots of different aspects to fast fashion that makes it a problem. First of all, it's produced so quickly that a lot of the times the quality of the fabric, quality of the construction of the garments is lacking, just so they can make it cheaper. And then it's sold in such a way that they bring it out and then a couple of months later they bring out something else to replace that one, the item that you just bought. So it's not just in the fabric and the construction of the garment, but also in the mentality of the cycle that they've produced. And then when the customers are finished with it, they're sent to the op shops because it's so poorly made, it doesn't last, and then it ends up in landfill, which is filling third world countries. Their landfill, they just can't keep up with it, and they've had to burn the landfills, and that's causing other issues on top of that. So it's huge.
Yeah.
If anybody wants to catch up on...
And for those outside of Australia...
Yeah, that's right. Well, and Australians don't see the problem because it's out of sight, out of mind. But for those that aren't in the world of fashion and would like to know a bit more, they can watch Foreign Correspondent did a half-hour show on it just recently on ABC. They can download it there. It's called White Dead Man's Clothing. Dead
White Man's Clothing, yes.
That's right.
It's really good. And I do recommend it.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's all about, in Ghana, and it's just opened up my eyes. I think there's a whole inspiration behind this podcast, actually.
Yeah. And
on that subject, do we need to re-educate the public on looking for quality and value rather than price? Yeah.
Definitely. I think that's it's a collaboration. First of all, we need our media and our fashion brands to slow down, and they need to understand that fine balance of marketing, I think. And we need our consumers to pull stumps and support those brands that are greenwashing, that aren't fast fashion, and just slow down their consumerism. When they're buying products, they buy with purpose.
Yes.
So not just fashion itself, but across the board, buy with purpose, so that you're buying a product that you know that you're going to wear or use, that even when it's had a decent life cycle in your home, that then you find the right home for it after your home. So whether it be an op shop or a charity or handing down the line that you've done it with purpose.
And I know you've touched on this before, and you have outreach to schools. With the upcoming Gen Zers that are going through the school system, are you seeing a change in attitude when it comes to this sort of slow fashion?
Yeah, I think I haven't seen it yet because we're just rolling out the program. It's a bit of a pilot program for us, but already seeing a change in the generation. They're doing more thrift shopping. They are voting with their pockets or their wallets by doing more thrift, secondhand clothing stores. And even the way they accessorise and they create fashion is quite unique. And the idea is that when we roll this program out through the schools is that we're teaching them from the grassroots, and they'll go home and implement those changes within their home.
Yeah.
because they'll understand more about fast fashion. So I think at the moment that generation is, well, they've sort of got a bit of an understanding of it. They don't have a full understanding of why they're doing it. They're just doing it because it's cheaper, going thrifting, and that is cheaper process. So they don't have to buy the fast fashion. So they're already doing it, but they don't know why.
Yep.
So by going into schools and giving them understanding, they'll start to roll that out through their homes, and so their parents, hopefully, and the rest of their family will start following suit.
That's really good. I like that point too. No, focusing on the why we should do it rather than dictate us what you should be doing. Yeah, I reckon that's really just a message that hits home. And ladies, this series is all about the future and how do you envision the world in 2031?
Well, I think we need to go back to the future. The Industrial Revolution in Britain changed the way that fashion was made from, fashion used to be a home-based industry, and the Industrial Revolution saw us creating big factories, and that's been the norm pretty much since then. But, lower production runs, less mass production, more personalisation as well. So rather than just having, 50,000 of the same T-shirt produced, when we're talking personalisation, it's more about having things made to order. So it can be the right size, the right colour. It might have some kind of design on it that you help create. So it's all about people still looking quite unique, but things being made more to order rather than just a whole lot of stuff being made with, a wish and a hope that they might sell.
Well, the good news is we are going for another industrial revolution, and I think the term revolution implies that what goes around comes around. So I think there is this hope for us yet.
Yes. Oh, and of course, the focus on things being made for longevity.
Yeah.
So, we've got to go back at the way we began our conversation, Dave. Quality. Quality is really important. Fashion should not be looked at as disposable anymore.
I take my hats off to my grandparents' generation, the one who grew up in the War and Depression. They had that make do and mend spirit. I think that needs to come back.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is, which is really, really great.
Absolutely.
We see the circular economy as being the new black. Fashion and the way it's designed and made and worn and used, we see it being reimagined, and we hope that customers will look to secondhand first before buying new. The youth of today are really leading this charge, and they're also driving the demand for transparency from their favourite brands. They want to know who made their clothes, where are they made, were their sustainable practices followed. There really is transparency, yeah. There is no quick fix for the fashion industry, and that's really why Mills & York came about, to be able to liberate great fashion from stylish wardrobes and allow people to rent and resell and buy designer and vintage fashion. And I think that if Sophie and I can change our consumer ways, we think that you can too. And we are, in Mills & York, we're trying to do our part to redesign fashion's future.
And that's a good point to make about the youth coming up, because I think they're more socially aware, more environmentally aware. And I think that once they're coming of age, I think the whole world's going to be in better hands.
Yeah, and there's a huge amount of education now out in schooling programs and universities, all about not just the textile industry, but about sustainability and doing their bit in all practices. I think every business and company has to intertwine it in their business model, otherwise they won't succeed.
I'm hoping that by the time we get to 2031, the scientists have mastered how to recycle fibre into a new textile fibre. So at the moment, they are starting to recycle textile fibres, but they can't recycle it into a new textile fibre. They're only recycling it, like recycling down processes. So they're turning textile, so for the likes of denim, they're turning that into cotton fill.
Yep.
Or they're turning it into tiles or building materials. They're not turning it in from textile fibre to textile fibre.
Yep.
So hopefully by the time we get to 2031, we're seeing more of that, because it'd be good to be able to, because at the moment we're using raw material all the time to make our fibre, so it'd be good to just reduce the use of raw materials.
And also don't forget, cotton is one of the most water-hungry crops out there.
Yes.
And that's take up so much water and land resources that we could use to feed a hungry population. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And hopefully by the time we get into that, another 10 years of time, we've also mastered how to balance MOQs. So at the moment, MOQs for many brands makes using smart fabrics and fibres almost unattainable.
Yep.
Because when you're starting off a brand, you don't have all the money in the world to start it off the brand. So you only want to do small units. But the fabrics you want are 10,000 new meters, and you just can't use, small labourers can't use that sort of material all at once. So we can find a way, if we can do a bit more like how we do the bulk food shopping, if we can do a bit more like that in the sustainable fabrics, that'd be really ideal.
And finally, where can we find you?
I have a website. It is donna-cameron.com.au. I'm also on Instagram, DonnaCameron_personal style, and on Facebook, Donna Cameron Style.
We're all over Australia. I mean, Sophie and I are actually based in Melbourne, but, we're an online platform and we're a peer-to-peer platform. So it really is about the members creating a community together. We want our members, no matter whether they're over there with you in Perth or in Brisbane or down in Tassie, to, form this community and be, try and change the way we consume fashion and create a banter about fashion and discuss things amongst themselves on the platform. And, the community was really a forefront of our plan. So no matter where you are in Australia, you can access great fashion.
Katrina, where else can we find you?
You can find me at www.fittingconnection.com.au.
No worries, and I'll make sure those in the show notes.
Fantastic.
And a big thank you to Donna, Katrina, Annabelle and Sophie. And ladies, thank you for coming on the show. I think you do all deserve a round of applause. As you can see, this is the end of Series 4, and we're really getting the concept about renewing our social contract through environmental action. Because as I said way back in episode 3, climate change is the big boss that we all need to face, and we all need to pull together as a team. Join us on November 1st when we've got Series 5, and we'll be looking back and we're revisiting AI, automation and blockchain. Starting off with the age-old question where we're revisiting, are robots here to take our jobs? We have the teams from Design Bro in the Netherlands and Affinity over in Sydney. The Friendly Futurist is a podcast West production. If you love this show, the best way you can do it is download the Acast app. Follow us, leave a review, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you would not miss out on whenever we release a new episode. And there are more incentives to join the community once you're into the Acast ecosystem. If you don't want to use Acast, that's okay. Just make sure you leave a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform. You can also support me via joining my Facebook group or subscribing to my newsletter where once a month I release what I learnt for the month, and it gives you insight to some really amazing ideas that are floating around in the world right now. Friendly Futurist is a podcast West production. It's been produced and edited by me, Dave Monk, further editing by Alvin Lacerna. If you really, really want to get the word out, make sure you tell your friends, neighbours, dog walkers, greengrocers, anyone who's interested in big picture thinking. Until next time, friends, remember, stay curious and the future is user-friendly.
Another Podcasts West production.